dinner tonight.
There was only you and me.
And I ate it all
We were
up.
young and wild and free.
Even though I don't like carrots.
Now nothing can take you away from me.
I learned how to swim this summer.
We've been down that road before.
And I could even open my
That's
eyes
over now.
when I'm underwater.
Keep me coming back for more.
Can you see me? I miss you, Daddy.
Baby, you're all that I want. When you're lying here in my arms, I'm finding it hard to believe we're in heaven.
It's been 5 years, Daddy.
Love is all that I need.
I'm in 5th grade
And I
now.
found it there in your heart.
I really like computers,
It isn't too hard to see.
but math is hard.
Heaven.
Mommy lets me sleep in one of your t-shirts.
Oh, once in your life you find someone
I think it still smells like you.
who will turn your world around.
I don't need to sleep with the light on
Pick
anymore.
you up when you're feeling down.
I'm trying not to cry, Daddy, but it still hurts.
Now nothing can change what you mean to me.
I really miss you, Daddy.
There's a lot that I could say. Just hold me now.
Can you see me? Can you see
Cause
me?
our love
Can you
will
see me?
light the way.
It's been 10 years, Daddy.
Baby, you're all that I want.
I started high school.
You're lying here in my arms.
I made the honor roll.
Finding it hard to believe.
I hope you're proud of
we're
me.
in heaven.
I'm also on the soccer team.
Love is all that I need.
Can you see me on the field?
And I found it there in your heart.
I've started thinking about
It
colleges.
isn't too hard to see.
Do you think I could be a
We're in
doctor?
heaven.
I know you'll be with me when I walk down the aisle.
I've been waiting for so long.
I try not to be sad,
Something to write.
but it hurts.
Love to come along.
I hope you know you're my hero. I love you so much.
Now our dreams are coming true.
Can you see me?
For
Can you
the
see
good
me?
times and the bad, I'll be standing there by you.
It's been 15 years,
Baby,
Daddy.
you're all that I want.
I'm finishing college.
When you're lying here in my
I
arms,
got into med school.
finding it hard to believe.
I really want to help people.
we're in heaven.
You have always inspired me.
Love is all that I need.
I met a nice guy
And I found it there in your heart.
who was really special to
It
me.
isn't too hard to see.
I think you would really like
We're
him.
in heaven.
We talk about our life together.
Oh,
Mom says he's a lot like you. I think about you every day. I'm still sad, but you make me strong. Can you see me? Can you see
we're in
me?
heaven.
I miss you, Daddy. I really miss you, Daddy.
I miss you, Daddy.
I miss you, Daddy.
The two planes flew into the two towers. Be advised, the North Tower is down. All personnel be advised, the North Tower is down.
You want me to say that? Test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. If you can start off by stating your first and last name and spelling it, please.
My name is Angie Fallon, Angie Fallon.
Angie, can you tell me what department you were in when 9/11 took place?
I was a nurse on Staten Island at the time, so I'm a nurse, but I did home care nursing, and that was the extent of my, I don't know that was how I was employed. That was my employment at the time.
What was your first reaction when, or I guess first thought when you found out that the attacks were taking place?
I actually was en route to go get fingerprinted for to be on the bus with my patient, and I had just crossed the Verrazano Bridge and was on the BQE when I saw the towers on fire. And I was instantly, I just had a really bad gut feeling in my stomach when I saw that. I said, there's nothing good going to come from that. The way it looked already, it was pretty bad. So my husband was a New York City firefighter at the time. So I got off the expressway right away and tried to get back home. I stopped at a deli and asked somebody if I could use their phone number to call my husband and find out what was going on. And unfortunately, that person wouldn't let me use their phone, so I just had a mad dash for the Verrazano Bridge to get back to Staten Island.
Can you tell me more about your 9/11 story?
It's twofold. The first part of 9/11 was rushing back home to get my daughters from school, because by then you had heard more on the news about what was going on. The towers had come down. One of the towers had come down on my way back home. And so it was trying to get them safety and try and get a hold of my husband, who I was desperately trying to reach, but we didn't have cell phones back then. So it was very difficult just trying to find out what was going on. And when I got home, I had a message from him just telling me that he was headed into the towers. So that was the only information I had until about 8 o'clock that night when he was finally able to call me. So I was dealing with that end of it. And then the following morning, I went in as one of the nurses to Ground Zero to aid and assist with the rescue workers. And what I found was, it was very difficult for me. I wasn't ready, even though I had watched it all day on the news, I wasn't ready for what I saw. So it was trying to find out if my husband was okay, and everybody calling the house, and every time that phone would ring, my heart would sink, because from everything I was hearing and seeing, I honestly didn't think he was alive. But I finally got that phone call and realized that he was. And then the next day I went in, and I thought I was just going to be helping a lot of the firemen in the pile coming out with cuts and, whatever they needed in assistance with. But when we got there, it was literally so many nurses, doctors, firemen, policemen just trying to figure everything out. And at that point, FEMA wasn't there. So before FEMA got there, everybody was kind of like trying to organize. And the very first thing they had me do was go with the group of, it was one doctor, 2 or 3 other nurses, a fireman, and a policeman. And we were literally scouring the area and the rooftops for any body parts that we could find. And it was our job to put them into a bag and then bring them back that would go to the morgue. They had like a makeshift vehicle type of morgue, and then I guess they were bringing it to wherever that was. And it was incredibly difficult for me to do that, but knowing that what I was doing was going to bring closure to some people is what made me push through. And they had told us that if we felt that any part was too big or too hard to handle or anything, to tag with a cone, like a traffic cone. We were given like a medium-sized traffic cone. So to this day, anytime I see traffic cones, I think about that. So for, I would say, a good part of the day after 9/11, that's what I was doing. Instead of helping people coming out of the pile, I was collecting body parts. Not many people know this because I don't talk about it much, but one of the things that really struck me is that we were on a rooftop, and you could see scattered body parts or flesh. I can't even describe it. It was just different things of a body. And all of us were like, there was a really bad smell, and we couldn't figure out where it was coming from. So then we followed our noses to a part of the rooftop, and then one of the doctors flipped it over, and it was part of an airplane seat. And when they flipped it over, the back of the body was burnt to that seat, and that's what we were smelling. So we couldn't obviously take that with us. But we marked it, and then we had to write anything that we marked. We had to write where it was and be as detailed as possible as to where it was so that somebody else could go back and collect it. So that was my immediate experience, A, not knowing if my husband was okay, and really fearing and thinking that he wasn't, and B, trying to collect body parts and trying to be helpful to anybody, any of the firemen, policemen, anybody that was in that pile rescuing bodies. And it was like a constant, you could hear a pin drop at times, because at times it was super noisy, and at times it was just like they were saying something in the pile, and then it was like quiet throughout because they would think that they would hear somebody calling for help or something. So you could hear a pin drop, or it was like total chaos. And it was just back and forth. And then at that time, there was also a lot of uncertainty if the buildings around it were stable. So many times you would hear, run or whatever, and people were just running. Actually, quite a few people got hurt. One guy that I saw tripped, got hurt, and his femur actually stuck out from his leg just because he was trying to escape what we thought would have been another building coming down or something. So it was very difficult all around in everything that we were trying to do. So,
How long would you say that you were spending time ground zero or on a roof?
well, my husband came home really, really late 9/11. It was like probably already the following morning. I went to the Staten Island Ferry and I picked him up. We went back home, and then we went back to Ground Zero. I want to say it was like 5, 6 o'clock that morning on the 12th. We went back to take the ferry across to walk up to Ground Zero. So that first day I was there from maybe 6 o'clock in the morning or so till I would say almost midnight. When I got back home, I was so distraught by what I saw that I took the ferry home. I couldn't remember where I parked the car at the ferry terminal. A police officer had to drive me home. And then my husband and I went back and we were able to find the car. But so the first day I was there really almost 24 hours. And then I would say every day after that I was there probably just as long, or, probably from like maybe 7 o'clock in the morning till about 8, 9 o'clock at night. And that happened probably for about 5 days or so. And then FEMA had become more organized, and they had pushed most of us out, the rescue workers who weren't, I guess, I don't want to say legally, but contracted to be there or whatever, I guess is the word. But every day that I went back, after the first day, most of my stuff was helping people coming out of the pile. And by the pile, I mean the pile that was left from the towers collapsing. It was mostly, a lot of them had cuts, and a lot of the guys had really bad blisters because their feet were all wet, and so it was just giving them new socks and new shoes, and then they would go right back in. But, some people needed stitches, so we would steri-strip them. Whatever we could do, because these guys didn't want to hear, maybe you should rest or something. They were going right back in. To them, it was like their family was in there. The firemen always say that, they have a brotherhood, so it's their brothers were in there. And there was no telling these guys, take a rest, sleep for an hour or anything, but I totally understood where they were coming from, so.
You mentioned having to mark pieces of body that were too large for you to carry with a traffic cone, and that affects you daily. How else did the experiences that you had on 9/11 affect your daily life?
Even like sometimes if I'll see it, I wasn't there obviously to see it, but you see the many images of that second plane flying into the tower, and when you see a plane flying really low, you instantly start to panic as to, oh my gosh, where's that plane going? And it brings flashbacks of, those images that we saw over and over again. I now work at Orlando Regional Medical Center on the med-surg floor, and, some people come in with you always have different patients with different things, and some of the stuff that you see makes you think back to that time. Unfortunately, the time around 9/11 and everything also was filled of memorials because some of our friends didn't come back from the towers. So it was a lot of memorials. So now, like, every time I think of a funeral or something, I'm thinking, well, how lucky those people are that they do have a body to honor, whereas these people didn't have any closure. So that affects me like that. I don't know. Every time it gets closer to 9/11, I seem to just be like zoned out. I try now to make sure that I ask off every year for 9/11 because I just find myself thinking about the whole day, really, and the whole week that followed, and then the months that followed with the funerals. And so it was a difficult time.
How long were you a nurse for before 9/11 happened?
I was a nurse for 6 years before 9/11.
And you're a nurse still today.
Mhm.
What brought you to the Lake Nona area?
I actually wanted to work for Disney, but not as a nurse. I just wanted to do something in their Imagineering department or their guest services departments. I know so much about Disney, and I've always had a love for Disney and an attraction to, not an attraction, but like Walt Disney, the man himself. I've just always been very intrigued by him and the person that he was. So that brought me to the area. And I'm still looking to try and see if I can do anything there, whether it be Imagineering. Guest relations, I think I would be phenomenal at, or anything like that in Disney, because I know so much about it and I know the parks so well. So,
Would you say that 9/11 and all that you saw plays into the factor that you, like, the reason why you wanted to stop being a nurse and go into Disney?
no, I don't think so. If anything, Disney actually was an alleviating factor for us, because we would go every year, and we actually had a trip planned that September, at the end of September, that we had to postpone to a later time because, my husband and the girls, my husband was so tied up with just constant overtime, and at that time we were still going to a lot of memorials, so it just was not the time to go away. But
With the 17th anniversary of 9/11 approaching, what do you want people to remember?
two things I really remember are the sacrifices that so many people made. And I think that it's important for people to realize the people that were on the planes. Yeah, it's just, to me, it just seems like so many of them sacrificed so much. That one plane that went down in Pennsylvania with supposedly what we hear through the media and through TV, that they, attacked. They went ahead and forward and tried to enter into the cockpit and did so. And so I want people to remember the sacrifices that so many made. And then the other thing that still sticks to my head is the American spirit that came through at that time. Every time we would leave the pile, no matter where we went, there was rows of people cheering us on when we left. Everybody, waving American flags. There was American flags everywhere at that time. Everybody was so proud to be an American. And the freedoms that we have. I want people to remember the unity that we had at that time. And sometimes I think back to that and wish that when it comes to political things, if we could all just remember that unity, that, we're all in it together. So,
What's some advice you would give to first responders or even nurses today?
in relation to, like,
If an event like 9/11 were to happen again, or like something that has such of a powerful effect
I think that
on you as a first responder.
So I think it would be very important to nurses or anybody, who is a first responder, whatever their position may be, to really, because some of us can join these groups ahead of time, and there's all different organizations that we can join to be brought to these areas, whether it be hurricanes and stuff like that, to mentally prepare for what you're going to see and for the hardships that people are going to be having. And the hardships that you're going to go through as a first responder. I went into it wholeheartedly because I wouldn't have thought about it twice, and I still wouldn't think about it twice. But I think people should try and prepare mentally for the way it's going to affect them. Because it's when you go to any area that's in trouble and in need like that, what you're going to see is not going to be pretty. My name is Angie Fallon, and I am a nurse that responded to 9/11. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Test 1, 2, 3.
One more time?
Test 1, 2, 3.
Perfect.
Take as much time as you need. I know that this is going to be a super tough thing for you to talk about. So
Okay.
if you need a break, just let me know. If you need water, anything, okay?
Okay.
We'll start off. State your first and last name, and if you can spell them for me as well.
It's Renee Palma, Renee Palma.
Okay. And Renee, can you tell me about your 9/11 experience?
You want me to start at the beginning?
Start at the beginning. Start wherever you're comfortable, if that's the beginning. And I have questions to help you go, like, continue
Okay.
the story if you need me. Some people don't. So just tell me your story from the beginning.
So I was a telecommuter, and I commuted from Connecticut to Jersey City every day. And I worked for Morgan Stanley, who had offices in both New York and New Jersey. And that morning, I took a 6:04 train every morning, the express one, into Manhattan. And from Manhattan, we took the 4 train to get to World Trade Center so that I could take the path downstairs under World Trade Center over into Jersey City. And that morning, it was actually a beautiful, clear sky, and I was telling you I wore red, and I'm totally not a red person, but I had a presentation, and that pop of color just kind of made me feel very, very good. And walking from one train upstairs to the next, as I approached the Millennia Hotel, which was on my left, their windows were made out of all mirrors. I stopped to look at myself and make sure that I was, still looking as fabulous as I wanted to through all that hustle and bustle. And I remember the sound of a plane just being so unusually loud that it made you look up like, what in the world? And at that point, I had moved away from the mirrors to where the traffic light area was. And as I looked up, I could see just the last part of the word American on the side of the plane as the plane pierced the building in front of me. And I don't know. I'm a New Yorker born and raised, and I think I've seen a lot. I never saw that before. And you just I kept walking. It doesn't hit you right away. It's kind of surreal, like, this is not happening, whatever. You keep going. There's like an island area, and as you get to the middle, I remember there were still people coming out of the building. The piercing, I swear to you, was like threading a needle. There was no big boom. It was like threading a needle. And then you start to see papers careening through the air, just. And then I saw a desk fall. You're like, okay, this is not natural, and this is not real, and now it's time to go, right? And I turned around. There was a woman next to me, and she had fallen in the middle of the street and kind of like given up. Anyway, I dragged her. Just saw that she didn't move further, turned around and dragged her across the street. And then we made our way up, again, past the Millennia, now on my right. There's a historic cemetery there. And as I approached the back of the cemetery, I mean, everyone was running. It didn't matter what direction. As stupid as it sounds, you still have people running on that side by the building. Everyone was running. It's not what you expect to see at 8 o'clock in the morning. Nobody wakes up and says, let me see a plane fly through a building. And when I got to the back of the cemetery, I couldn't breathe. No matter how much I tried to fill my lungs, I couldn't breathe. I was having an asthma attack, which I've had as a child before. And there was a woman, and she was kind of like, she had her back up against the wrought iron gate, and she's like she's breathing hard, she's holding her knees, and she realized I was having an asthma attack. And she said to me, come here. And then she yelled at me to come here. And she said, get on your knees. And I got on my knees. She put my head right between her knees. And she began rubbing my back aggressively. Just rubbing it. Then you don't know where to go. Like, what do? There was a payphone across the street. And while I never carried cash, I had a chest bag that Velcroed in the center. And I dug in the bottom of the bag, get some change out. I called my sister. She worked for a law firm in the area. And they got her on the phone, and she was crying. She was in a conference room. She knew that I traveled this way every day, and that was my route. And she was panicked and crying. She told me to stay where I was. She was going to come and meet me. And as she was coming to meet me, well, first, I ended up in Mrs. Fields Cookies across the street. You want to just hide out, right? And as we're in Mrs. Fields Cookies, the second explosion happened. And you're like, wow, this is glass? Probably not where I belong, in a store enclosed in glass. There were people just trampling each other. I mean, grown men running over women. Not our finest moment. But you're scared. There's a woman out front as I left Mrs. Fields Cookies. She's bleeding on the side of her face. Went back into Mrs. Fields Cookies, asked them for a cup of water. They just wanted everybody out the store. Finally, the guy gave me a cup of water. I bring it to the woman. She's on the ground, on the corner. She gets up and goes about her business. I go to meet my sister, and as my sister's coming, she gets hit by a taxi cab. And you just like, this day can't get any worse. It's like, on the grand scheme of crappy days, this one is definitely making its way to the top. And then my sister reminds me that my nephew's school is over in the same area. And if that building actually falls, it's falling in the direction of his school. We need to go get him. At that point, we're both trampled so bad that my shoulder sack, my arm sack is ripped off of me. We make it to my nephew's school. They tell us that another woman picked him up. It was his aunt and his paternal aunt who lived in the area. So we go get my nephew from her house. Basically, you get in, it's that fight or flight, right? You're not fighting a plane that just went through a building. And you just want to get out the city. For those of us that call that city home, even though I didn't live there, you can't believe this just happened to your city. Like, how in the world? How does this happen? And for people that are faith believers, like myself, how does God let something like this happen? Like, how in the morning does he let something like, how anytime does something like this happen? And as we're trying to leave, you continue to see bodies falling out of they were like falling from the clouds. And the smoke and the soot. And the breathing was awful. And what made it even worse is that there were people setting up tripods in the middle of the street. There are people falling from buildings. They don't need to be on camera. This is a dark day for everybody. Why are you capturing this on camera? Why is that what you're doing instead of helping people? It didn't make sense. We got to, my sister and I put together a plan to get out of the city. I remember making another phone call, trying to reach my mother. I couldn't get her, so I called a college friend of mine, and he answered, and I told him exactly where I was, what was happening, and I said, please tell my mother that Please tell my mother that I'm going to make it home. But the other phone call that I made, well, before I went to Mrs. Fields Cookies, was my boyfriend at the time. We didn't stay on the phone long. And when I finally got to talk to him again, his mother told me, I don't know what you said to my son, but he went flying out of the house after he hung up the phone from you. And between that time and talking to him again, we had concocted this plan. We were going to get on any form of transportation we found to make it out of the city, to make it out of Manhattan, back to where our family lived in the Bronx. And we got on a bus, headed uptown, and there was this bus driver, young guy, and we got on the bus, and as he continued to make stops, the man was in tears. He wanted to get people out of there, but there were so many people packed like sardines on this bus. And he kept telling people, begging them, I want to get you out of here. But if you don't let the back doors close, I can't move the bus. It's not me. It's just the way the bus is made. If the back doors are not closed, the bus is not going to move. Then he started in his pain to tell people how he had only been on the job like a week. And he really wanted to help people, so please help him let the doors closed, which meant leaving people behind. And the pain in his face for having to leave people behind was... Remember when I said you didn't think the day could get any worse? It just kept getting worse and worse. So we made it into Harlem. And the funny thing is, when we made it into Harlem, people didn't know what the hell had happened. They were shopping. They were business as usual. They had no idea what happened. There were fighter jets everywhere flying over the city, and that captured their attention. Wow, what's going on? Why are these fighter jets here? And you don't even have it in your heart to start to explain it to people. You just want to go home and pretend like the day never happened. You just want to go home. It was so ugly down there. Everybody down there had a reason to want to leave. And I am amazed that first responders didn't run. Hell, I was running. Everybody was running. And my hat will always be off to them for staying. Because it was like choosing to stay in the pit of hell. Who does that? So, we tried to catch a cab to get from Harlem into the Bronx. This cab driver wanted to charge us this astronomical amount of money. We got out of the cab. You know, we knew how much it should cost to make it that far, and I made it to family's house, and I made another telephone call to my boyfriend's cell phone, and I didn't get him. And then I called his house again and told his sister where I was, and his is the phone number. And I remember so many hours had passed by, and he called, and he said, there's one train leaving Grand Central headed back to Connecticut. Can you make the train? And I said, I can't make it back to Grand Central Station. And he said, you don't have to. Can you make it to 125th Street? And I said, I'm going to make it. I had no clue how I was making it. from the Bronx all the way back into Harlem again. There were really no trains. I got on a train. I made it to 100 and I think 68th Street, Dykeman. Got off the train when they stopped it. And I began running all the way to 125th Street. I went up the wrong side. I'm born and raised in New York. I know the different sides of the track, and I'm so discombobulated. I ran up. I saw the train coming. I flew up the steps only to realize, Renee, you got to go to the other side. I said, oh, crap. Flew back down the steps, across the street, all the way up the other side again. I didn't care where I got on that train. I just wanted to get on the train. When the door opened, of all the doors, he was standing right there. He was standing right there. And I said to myself, I'm going to marry this man. I'm going to marry him. And there was some type of game, I guess, going on. I'm definitely a Yankees fan, but that day I didn't have all the joy that they had on that train. You know, some people had their faces painted, and anyway. Then my husband, who's now my husband, today is actually our anniversary. We've been married 16 years. And he said, I went to Mrs. Fields looking for you. His friend drove him to the beginning of the Brooklyn Bridge, and he ran by foot over the bridge into the financial district. He put his clothes from that day in a trunk, and we've never opened the trunk again. He went from Mrs. Fields Cookies. He made his way to Grand Central. He knew I was going to try to make it home. And a couple years after, my husband got sick. Out of nowhere. Avid basketball player. Always working out. He developed Graves' disease. Unexplainable. Really not. He ingested all of those fumes and that soot. And, but God was good. My husband went through radiation treatment, and he manages his condition very well. And when I think about that day, suffer a lot of nightmares watching people fall from the sky. It's definitely not anything I would wish on anybody else. But something beautiful came out of it. Something did. And I wouldn't change my life for $1 million. There are great people that rose to the occasion on that day and showed their families and themselves what they're made of. And if ever there's a challenge, my husband, he does these Spartan races. He's done like 5 of them, like all 3 levels. But if ever you want to figure out what you're made of, try waking up on September 11th and doing that day again. That'll teach you what you're made of.
I As we approach the 17th anniversary, a lot of people just kind of forget about it. And a lot of people nowadays, younger kids, were not a part of that. What would you want them to know? What would you want them to remember?
You know what? It's funny. As this world crumbles with figuring out how to love one another past the color of people's skins or their economic class, that day, nobody cared what you looked like, how much money you made, and where you lived. There were true heroes that rose to that occasion and showed us the true meaning of what it means to live and love. And young people need to take a page out of that book. Hell, I think everybody needs to take a page out of that book. It's kind of like my mother used to say, you'll know who's worth it in your life when the poop hits the fan. And that day the poop hit the fan. Pretty bad. But it was the perfect recipe to say, stop worrying about the things that don't matter. Stop it. Tomorrow's not promised. For all of those people we laid to rest, tomorrow wasn't promised for them, right? Every day is a gift. Take it and stop the craziness. Just stop it. We approach this day and you're like, people forget. It's easy to forget when nothing impacted you. It's easy to forget. And it's easy to think that people are making a big deal and should just move on. Tell that to the family still dealing with the consequences of that day. You don't get to just move on. And there are a lot of families, you know how with our first responders and with our servicemen that responded that day, people forget that their families responded too, right? So as a lot of them deal with health problems, their families are still responding. Their families are taking care of them because they took care of someone else. A lot of someone else's. Be a blessing to those people. They didn't have to do what they did, but they did it. And you know what? If it happened again, I guarantee you most of them would say, I'd do it again. Take a page out of that book. Do it again. And just because every day a plane is not going through a building, nothing's exploding, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't still rise to the occasion for everything else. It doesn't. If anything, these young people should look at everybody that survived that day and aspire to be them. Really. Because like I said, people were trampling each other, running over each other, and in the haze of all of that, helping each other. Helping. The lady in the street, the lady bleeding in front of Mrs. Fields' cookies. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just wanted to go home. The woman, the nurse, who yelled at me to put my head between her knees, she could have been running in the opposite direction, not standing there helping me. There's something to be said about the people on that day, and I'm never going to forget. First responders, my hat is always off to them, and it always will be. And it's not because all of them actually were there and responded. It's for what they signed up for. This is the job that they chose. Not everybody's willing to choose those jobs. So my hat is off for them just for that. That's the job they chose.
You've mentioned a lot about how it continues to affect you. For the average person, 9/11 is just another day, but how does what you went through affect you daily?
You know, before 9/11, if somebody would have said to me, Let me rephrase it. Before 9/11, I didn't worry about dying. I don't know. You live life, right? I was working for a great company. I was at the start and the rise of my career. I mean, who doesn't graduate college and want to work for Morgan Stanley, right? So I traveled. I mean, my girlfriends would literally call me at work on a Friday and say, there's a cheap ticket to Atlanta, be on the plane at this time. I had no clothes, no toothbrush. I'd buy it all through the airport, pick up and leave. I was very carefree. I was a different person. When my husband asked me to marry him, I said no. You see how fast death can take over. You become afraid of losing everything. For a week, I stayed in my house with the blinds closed, and the backfire of a car would send me through the roof. And now, I don't like being in crowds. I won't go to concerts. When I go places, I make sure I know where the exits are. My children think that I am hyper obsessed with knowing their every move, and it's true. You look at loss differently because something has taught you the lesson that every day is not promised, and you don't get to decide when. You have no input. It's not your choice. You can be the victim of someone else's choices. And when that is the only thing stuck in your brain for a long time, it's kind of hard to go back to living differently. I took a position at Deloitte & Touche in Hartford. They were on the 32nd floor after I left Morgan Stanley. When I interviewed, I did not interview on the 32nd floor. So my first day when they said report to the 32nd floor, I was like, what? Yeah, no, I can't do that. And I remember calling Michael, my husband, saying, I can't do this. I'm not taking the elevator up 32 flights. I'm not doing that. And I made myself go to the 32nd floor. And the building swayed. And you don't want to cry in front of your new coworkers who just want you to be that powerhouse project manager that they hired. And you feel unstable. And every day is a challenge. Not to give that day all of your life. Every day was a challenge. To get up and go to church was a challenge. Not to be... The rule in my house at that time, even for my mother's house, the footage was nonstop. No TV. I can't watch. News, commercials, who wants to come out with a movie, interviews. No TV. I don't want to see a newspaper. You become a recluse. As much as humanly possible, you become a recluse. And you get so used to being that way that you forget the person you were. And it's like, it's trying to build yourself over again in your 20s. And the nightmares, waking up in cold sweats as someone is falling from a building and you wake up just before they hit the top of the roof building and lowest to them. And you feel like an utter freak.
You've said a lot about thanking, the first responders that were there and how you have so much respect for them. Can you kind of reiterate that, but can you speak directly into the camera?
That day was like walking into the pit of hell. And you guys had every reason not to want to be there, because we didn't. But you stayed. You chose that job. You honored it, and you stayed. And I'm thankful for every last one of you that rose to the occasion. You are true heroes, and people like myself never forget you or your families.
You remember?
Yeah. My name is Renee Palma, and I am a 9/11 survivor.
Yeah. They switched them on over there. I'm like, this is.
Listen, I'm 54. You guys don't put too many lights up. You know, let's keep it calm. There you go. Make it nice. The little darker's got to look good at night. I'm telling you.
We're making it work.
I'm an attractive man at nighttime, I tell you.
Was it really?
I'm like, something's not right. And
No,
then
I don't even remember it being this dark in the first interview. So
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So if you
What's
just
it
look at Nicole really quick. Amazing.
don't look at that camera.
That's fine.
Focus set, right?
Yep, that was perfect.
Sweet. Yeah.
No, he's been speeding for a while, so we're good.
Okay.
James, time code at 1:07:37 now?
Yeah.
All right, perfect.
Okay. You guys are good?
Cool.
All right.
Are you guys gonna close that door all the way?
Yeah, I'm gonna
Okay.
tape it so I can get back in if I need to, but
All right.
we're gonna shut it for audio. It's like Watergate. I'm vertically. Perfect. Oh, and Adam, can you just give me a quick audio? Just give me a check 1, 2.
Check. Check 1, 2. Check.
Perfect.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll start off. If you can state your first and last name and then spell them first.
Okay. My name's Adam. Last name is Fallon. Adam, Fallon.
Adam, what department were you with when 9/11 took place?
The New York City Fire Department.
When the attacks happened, what was your first thought?
I did not know it had happened because I was actually at family court that morning. I got there around 8:15 or so with my first wife. We were fighting over the kids, which actually meant nothing in the end because we both got them. But I was at the court on the North Shore of Staten Island, and we didn't even know the first one hit until maybe 5 to 9 or so. So it had been, 10, 15 minutes after. And we looked across. They closed the court, and we looked across, and I saw it on all the smoke and stuff because you could see across the bay. That's when I first found out about it.
So tell me a little bit more about your experience as a firefighter who was ground zero.
From, right from that point on.
Yeah.
When I looked across and I saw that the tower was on fire or something along those lines, lots of smoke, I said, oh boy, this is a tough one. This is going to be a tough job. At that time, nobody knew, especially that far away, what was going on. So the court was closed, and I got back in my car and I went back to my house. It was about 10 minutes away. And at that time, I looked on the news, and that's when they said a plane had hit the tower, and then boom, the second plane hit the tower. So this is it was probably right after, so maybe it had been a clip that they'd shown several times. I left a message for my wife, Angie, at the time, and said, okay, I got to go in. They're recalling all the firemen, and I went to the firehouse, and a half hour, 45 minutes later, we were on the Staten Island Ferry going over. So that was probably 10 o'clock. I don't believe we knew at that time that the first one had fallen. But we took the ferry over, and you saw lots and lots of smoke and billowing and dust everywhere. When we were on the ferry, we divvied up different lieutenants and firefighters, and I was with my one lieutenant, Tony Godagno, who's still a very good friend of mine. And we got there, and I remember it was probably roughly 11 o'clock, and we were walking up Broadway, right past the Bull, dust everywhere, papers everywhere. And as we got closer, lots of fire apparatus, trucks, engines, EMS, ambulances. All the lights are on, everything's running, all the compartments are open, all the tools are out. But there's nobody around. There's nobody around. There's no firefighters. There's no EMS. There's no police. Nobody was there. It was still, to this day, that was very, very eerie. As we got closer, you saw the pile and such, and then you started seeing people, and people doing what they could for the rescuing people or helping each other out. It was very, very dusty. I know that it was very confusing. You know, it was, we didn't, I don't think, I know I didn't know how big of an event it was. We knew that it had been hit twice. There was some idea that maybe it was a couple airplanes. Was it an accident? Well, 2 times in the same hour, that doesn't happen, so that was going on. But our job was to save people, not to worry about what happened. Let's save people. Let's see what we could do. And we all, with my Lieutenant Tony Guadagno, we ended up, the building is at the Hilton, and we climbed up to the 25th, 26th floor with a few of us, and we were putting water through a stang onto the building right next to it because it was on fire. It was an old building, a heavy building, so there's no chance that it was going to collapse, but it was on fire. And we did that for several hours, you know, and still we're kind of trying to figure out what we're doing. It's such a big scale that there was such a mess, and we actually, Tony and I climbed up to the roof of the I think it was the Hilton, and we just kind of gave it a look-see to get an idea of what we were dealing with, and that was my first sight from up high, you know, of what was going on, how massive it was, you know, and it's not funny, but as we open the door to the roof, we get roof access, we walk out, and Tony trips over something. It's not funny, but and it was a person's sneaker. It was a black Pro-Ked with just his foot, yeah, just a piece of the body, which leads me to something else. There's no full bodies anywhere. There's parts of people, you know. That was it. Everything was pulverized, you know. Find a leg, a hip bone, a hand, you know, fully intact, you know. But I never saw a body, fully intact body, the whole time I was there.
So when it actually came, what ladder were you?
Tower Ladder 79, North Shore, Staten Island.
When it came to actually arriving, because you said you had taken the ferry over to the towers, how long would you say that you were there for? Like, I know they came in shifts.
Well, when we first got there was no shifts. Everyone was there. Anybody that was working or got recalled, they did the best they could, but just many people went in, and I don't think they really wanted that because there was still a big threat of other buildings. We got in, like I said, probably 11:30. Could be back and forth in a half hour or so. And I was there till Tuesday night, 11, 12 o'clock at night, and there really wasn't much to do. They're still trying to get us, telling us, go back to the firehouse. There's too many people here. Let's go back. So I went home with Tony. He and I went over on the ferry again, and that's when I saw my wife, Angie. I still hadn't seen my kids, my daughters. They were, 5 and 3, or, I'm sorry, no, they're 7 and 5, and I didn't see them until the next day, you know. They had an idea what was going on. They were younger, they'd seen things on the news. They knew Dad was a fireman, but it was good to see them. You know, changes your life big time. So I got back Tuesday, the 11th. I got back home, saw my wife Angie, and I went back and I told her what was going on and everything. And the next Wednesday morning, Tony and I, they said everyone go back to the firehouses. They got to go back. Well, we kind of cheated and we went right to this ferry. And Angie came with us, and the three of us went over. We kind of snuck her with us. They didn't want anyone except firefighters over there, and they really didn't even want us there at the time. They wanted us to go back to the firehouse. Well, he knew somebody, I knew somebody, and we got back in the Wednesday. And I said goodbye to Angie, and she went and did her thing and set up. And Tony and I, we just went in, did what we could. We searched the pile. We met up with our tower ladder 79. They had come in, and all the companies that were there, first, second, third, fourth responder, fourth alarm, everything was pulverized. All the equipment. 79 truck from Staten Island. We didn't get there till I think they got there Tuesday afternoon, late afternoon, evening. So they were up and running, putting water on, checking out, searching buildings and things of that nature. But still, Tony and I we saw them, we met up with them, but we still were kind of doing our own thing through the pile, and like I said earlier, we didn't find anybody. We found pieces of people. It was Wednesday, and I went home Thursday afternoon, Thursday night maybe, and I was there from Wednesday morning, 36 hours to Thursday afternoon, evening, before we finally went home. And I think Angie came home Thursday night. I didn't even see her,
Sorry, 9/11 was just one day for the average person who didn't have to go into the rebel. How does that day affect your daily life?
It changed my perspective on life real quick. I used to work. I worked on the side. Always had to get ahead, make enough money, put a little aside, have a good time. After 9/11, things change. Your perspective, your priorities change big time. I wanted to go on vacation with my family a lot more. I wanted to see my daughters a lot more. I mean, I saw them all the time, but I still wanted to see them more. I think I was always active in their lives. It's one of the reasons I became a fireman, because you can work your schedule around whatever you want, whether it be side work or your family. I moved it back around my family, so I could make as many things as I could, and that's what affected me the most. That's the way my life changed the most. I just went back to family. A lot of people did. You kind of take it for granted that your family's always going to be there. As a fireman, you take risks, but you're intelligent, you know what you're doing. You don't think you're going to get hurt, and most of the time you don't. But, that changed everything. That big time change for me. It's not a wake-up call, but it did change the way I live my life, I still like to go out with the boys and play basketball and have a cocktail every now and then, but I know that I wanted to be around my family a lot more.
And I'm sorry if I had missed this from earlier. How long were you a firefighter?
I got on in 1996. I was old. I was 32 when I got on. There was only 75 of us in my class. Usually the classes are 150, 200. There was only 75 of us. And there's a few of us that were older. They just kind of not that they left us alone. They were good to us, I got on in 96. Not related to 9/11, I blew out my knee in 2010. My left knee, ACL meniscus, and I retired in 2012 with a disability. Not related to 9/11, but still to this day I do a physical every year with the fire department. I go north, I visit family, do a physical, and I do a physical myself with my own doctor, just to make sure, knock on wood, so far I haven't had any issues, but then again, I was there for many, many days, so we'll see. So far, so good.
And you say you go back up north, you go back to New York?
Yes, I have family. My mom and my brother and cousins stuff live in a little place called Middletown, New York, Orange County. It's about 80 miles north of the city. I lived in Staten Island, and I still have lots of friends still there. Some of them have moved to New Jersey over the border. I still see them also. It's good to go back. They have 4 seasons up there. It's nice.
Were you born and raised in New York?
I was born in Monticello, New York. And I was born and raised in Middletown, New York, you know. We always went to the city as a kid. Museum of Natural History, see all the sites. I went to the top of the Trade Center several times. Got a Sky Burger, Sky Coke, Sky Fries. That's what they used to call them. But my first wife, she was from Staten Island. So after college, we moved and we did the city thing in the mid-'80s and early '90s. It's very nice, very enjoyable. Love the city. Love it. Nothing like it.
What's it like seeing all of I guess the rubble and the destruction from 9/11 and then going back? How does that affect you?
It was very overwhelming, the amount of destruction that was there that day and preceding days. I remember when I first went back, I didn't go back for the longest time after we'd gone and had done the initial. I did not go back for a long, long time, years. Because I didn't think it was necessary, really. I started my career in 3-truck in New York City and Union Square. That's where I started in '96, Lower Manhattan. So I knew all the companies around there. I worked, I drove, you know, all those companies down there, and I knew a lot of the firefighters that died. You know, I think the number I said, I knew like 30 plus people I would have sat down and had dinner with. You know, so even though I was on Staten Island, I knew a lot of people. And I don't, whether I was embarrassed that I wasn't there or what, I just stayed away. Once everything got settled, I made sure everyone was okay, you know, did what I had to do. Went to a lot of funerals in Staten Island, a lot of people from Staten Island, you know. 50 plus funerals I went to myself, I stopped counting. You know, it's just what it was. But the pile was just overwhelming, you know, unbelievable. And going back after, it's still tough, you know. It's still tough to go, you know. I always say I was older when it happened. I wasn't mid-20s. I was mid-30s, you know. Maybe I had thicker skin and such. But it's tough. It's still tough to go back. You know, they have a little museum there, 9/11 museum. I went in there. I had some friends were in town, and they said, listen, I kind of gave them where I was and this and that. And they asked for donations. I said, I've donated enough. And I just showed my badge. I said, no, I'm not. I felt like they were trying to profit off of us. And they do. At least that's my feeling. Yeah.
What would be some advice that you would give to first responders, firefighters today?
Obviously, you do it because you love the job. You're not making money. You're not rich. Enjoy your family. You know, enjoy your friends as much as you can. If your job allows you time during the week when everyone's doing the 9 to 5er, enjoy that time. You know, don't miss any outings that your family has. You know, not that you should smell your kids, but you know, enjoy them while they're smaller. If you have smaller children, enjoy your parents. That's what I took away from it mostly. You know, going back to my family life.
And with the 17th anniversary of 9/11 about to take place, what do you want people to remember?
I thought about this question, and I don't have an answer. What do I want them to remember? Don't forget, you know, all the lives, especially now. It's 17 years, and people are starting to have medical issues because of this. You know, everything that was in the air down there was toxic, We didn't have any equipment. They didn't give us anything because there was nothing to give. And they said it was safe. I'm sure they thought it was. Regardless, we still were going to be there. That's the bottom line. You know, if things come up, if you see anything, I'm sure I think Congress is voting on it again in 2020. You know, the 9/11 bill for health, or I don't know exactly what. Just don't think of it as someone trying to get over. It's just people are starting to get sick and die. You know, people that were there, that were younger and were just there and sucked in some of this pill. People in mid-20s getting breast cancer and cancers that you're not supposed to get. You know, not till later in life, shall we say. Don't forget that even though it's been 17 years, it's still affecting a lot of people. You know, like I said earlier, knock on wood, I haven't had any issues. I say yet, I hate to say yet, but I have not had any issues from it. And I hope I don't. But I probably will. Hi, my name's Adam Fallon. I was a firefighter for New York City. I was at 9/11.
State your first and last name and spell it.
Anthony Michael Labosco, Labosco.
Okay, so what department were you with when 9/11 happened?
I worked for the Department of Treasury, United States Secret Service Uniform Division.
How long had you worked with the Secret Service when 9/11 had taken place?
At that point, it was 10 years. I was hired in basically 91, so about 10 years, just a little over 10 years.
What was your first thought when you found out that the attacks were taking place?
Well, if I could just tell you the story, it may answer some of those questions that you have of me. So let's go back to the morning of 9/11. I was on Pennsylvania Ave on my bicycle. I did bike patrol around the White House complex, which encompasses, of course, the White House, the Treasury building, the Treasury Annex, the old Executive Office building, the new Executive Office building, and the Blair House. And, of course, encompasses within that area is Lafayette Park, which is directly across the street from the White House. You may have seen it. It's a lot of protesters in the past. You would see them with signs. They can't do that anymore. And then to the south, all the way to basically Washington Monument. So at this moment, I was on Pennsylvania Ave, and one of my partners rides up and he goes, "Hey, man, a plane just crashed into the World Trade Center." So our first initial reaction, or my initial reaction, was like, really? I mean, thinking it was a Cessna, something small, and they just kind of flew into the World Trade Center. You know, I'm thinking to myself, like back in the day of watching King Kong with the planes on there and stuff, with King Kong. I'm like, it's not like you can't see it, Then I got a phone call from my wife and said, "Hey, there's a plane just crashed." And I said, "Yeah, I just heard about that." So at that time, I said, I'm going to go into the break room and put on the news, because we had TVs there. And on the bike, it's literally a 30-second ride. So I rode over there, and then the news was already on, watching, and then I see another plane crash into the World Trade Center. So I say to myself, originally, my first thought was that was a replay of what had happened, but then I saw there was smoke coming out, so it can't be a replay. So immediately I got off the phone, and I said, I got to go, we're at war. That was my initial reaction, because when two of them hit like that, that's not, to me, that was clearly, on purpose. So few seconds, maybe a minute or two, we get air traffic telling us about the situation, telling us about there's another aircraft coming our way on radar was picked up from Dulles Tower, and Reagan National also has, clear airport right there, which is not far from the White House, a couple miles. And they were following the plane coming down the Potomac from the, at this case would be northwest, which was from Dulles. And I got to tell you, it was pretty hairy moment. It's like, wow, so another one's coming, but now it's in our area, not New York. And very shortly after, I can't really give you a timeline, within minutes, we were notified via radio that the aircraft had crashed into the Pentagon. From the White House, you can't necessarily see the Pentagon. It's not that far away, but enough where the lay of the land would not allow you to see it or hear anything like that. So immediately after that, they were saying there was another aircraft that was unaccounted for, also heading towards D.C., but it was farther out. So we were notified that planes will be scrambled to deal with that, the Air Force over there in Langley. And so in the meantime, we were given orders to clear all what we call the White House complex. That includes all those buildings that I mentioned before. So since I was already in the new executive office building, we started from the top and started pushing people out of the office. It was strange, very surreal, because people were like, why? Always want to question, why? I'm busy. Well, because there's a plane coming in potentially that we don't know where it's going to crash or whatever the scenario may be here. And then because some people did not see the news because they're working, so not everybody was aware of what was actually happening. So as the word was spreading fairly fast, people got the point, and it became easier as we started to clear the building. And then I also, right after I immediately cleared the new executive office building, I had to go help with the old executive office building, which is a very large building that sits west of the White House if you're looking at it from front. So went in there, same thing, started clearing people. The new executive office building is a lot of staff. The old executive office building is where the vice president's office is. Of course, the White House and West Wing, that's where the president sits. Treasury building's more offices. That's where the Secretary of the Treasury has his office. The annex, more offices. Blair House, there was no one in Blair House. Blair House is usually where heads of state come. They have that option if they want to stay at the Blair House. It's kind of like a brownstone, like a New York City brownstone. So after we cleared the buildings, knowing that the Pentagon had been hit, can't really give you the timeline, but shortly after, we were notified that the fourth plane had crashed in Pennsylvania. And so everything was accounted for as far as on air traffic control. So we were aware that there was nothing else coming inbound. That took a lot of pressure off, because at least now we had time to work and try to get our, composure from the initial shock of basically being attacked, not being obviously born in World War II. So, Pearl Harbor, it's something kind of new for us as Americans. And basically rallied up, got all special weapons, and secured the perimeter around the White House. It was a very long day for the next couple months. But what was really telling for me is I would go home every day. I had two routes that I could take. I could take the 14th Street Bridge and go down 395 to get to 95, or go across the Memorial Bridge and go near the Pentagon, which I chose to. A lot of it depended on traffic, what time I was leaving. But I like going past the Pentagon just because it was just more interesting to look at as I rode by. And you could see basically the hole in the side of the building right from the highway because that's the side they came in. And it was quite shocking, to be quite honest. It's like, wow, this is, because I wasn't in New York, so I couldn't, that was all video. And this is something right here that I was passing, the Pentagon. And I remember that day well. It was just, it's one of these days you never forget, where you were at that day. Unfortunately, I was working for the Secret Service and was actually kind of part of it, or, just kind of reminds me of the day probably before a lot of people were even born, but another incident like this that kind of sat in my mind was the day the Challenger exploded. Where were you when that happened? And that was, somebody just asked me that question not long ago. And I was in high school, so I would go home for lunch and I would watch, at the time, it was just basically 30-minute CNN news that kept on rotating. And I watched they had, as they used to with the Challengers or the space shuttles, they would have them filmed and you'd watch because it was actually pretty cool to watch and see that thing explode. It's like, what? I mean, it was kind of surreal because, like, I don't think that's supposed to be happening, and I had that same feeling when I saw that second plane crash into the World Trade Center. It was like, whoa, nah, that's it. That this is an attack. So that's based on that day. About 30 days later, in October, I did go to Ground Zero with President Bush. He went over there to see what the progress was 30 days after. I was shocked. It was devastating because this is a building, World Trade Center. It was a building that I, growing up in New Jersey, literally minutes away from downtown. I've been to this building plenty of times. Matter of fact, that's where the Secret Service has a field office, and that's where I went and was hired out of the World Trade Center. And now you just see basically rubble, and it reminded me of something like you see in a movie set. But the smell was all too real. If I can describe it, it would smell of concrete, and if what electric would smell like, you could smell it, just was a weird apocalyptic type smell. It's just kind of weird. I can't really describe it. Strangely enough, if I can try something that remind me of that maybe some people can relate to is if they ever been to the Terminator ride at the Universal when they had it. I don't know if they still have it. They would push in some type of smell to give you the sense of this, futuristic war, scenario. And actually, that was probably the closest thing I could smell to it, just like concrete that burnt, And another strange thing, if I remember, you probably saw some photos. There was iron. The I-beams had crumbled into a cross that just happened to be there, and that was kind of the backdrop of where the president was having a speech. It was off to the right a little bit, but basically it was there, and president was, thanking NY, New York Fire Department, Police Department, Port Authority guys. It was a hell of a scene right there, but it's amazing if you get to go back and see what it looks like now. The Freedom Tower, they did a great job.
Can you talk about why you moved here?
Sure. So after...
You can say, like, I moved here because or something.
Yeah, I moved to the Orlando area because after 9/11, oh, okay, so I moved to the Lake Nona area because after 9/11, they started up the United States Air Marshal Program, although they had air marshals prior to that, but it was a whole different thing. It was just for basically hijackings back in the 60s, Cuban hijacking crisis and stuff like that. That apparently happened a lot when Cuba was going through their troubles. And so they created a program to stop those hijackings. But then after 9/11, it changed completely, because now it went from taking a plane and, hey, I want a political asylum, I want to go to Miami or wherever, and landing the plane, and they just wanted to come to the United States, to where it was actually using planes for mass destruction. And clearly you could see what can happen with a jumbo jet, with the amount of fuel crashing into a building. Clearly could cause devastation and a lot of loss of life. So the air marshals were doing a mass hiring, and I wanted to, obviously this didn't sit very well with me as an American, so I wanted to do what I could to make sure that would never happen again. I was hired real quick. It's all federal, so it's not like, basically you turn in your badge and gun on Friday and you pick up another one on Monday. Same, pay structure. It's all still federal. And after that, things were reorganized. Agencies went from Treasury Department to DHS, Department of Homeland Security. It just, they just reorganized the way certain agencies, who they fell under. And Air Marshals falls under DHS, Department of Homeland Security. So yeah, I became Air Marshal, and we have an office right here in Orlando, and that's it. Just came here. I thought it would be a good experience here in the Lake Nona, Central Florida area. But kids were young, and had a lot of amusement parks. Disney and Universal and SeaWorld, and even Busch Gardens over there in Tampa. So I thought it would be a really good place to come and raise a family. Weather was better, but it's subjective. If you like winter, you want some snow. We don't get that. So, yeah, and then it was a new and upcoming area. I thought too. It was very, I can remember Narcoossee Road had nothing but cows. So that has changed, For the better, we have stores. For the worse, we have traffic now. So.
To go back to 9/11, what would be some advice you have for first responders today?
Well, my advice would be, one, in today's world, everything has to be taken seriously. Because I could tell you back in, if I could just say some stories, they'd have some, hey, there's a bag over here. Yeah, it's a bomb. Yeah, the old day, you have a guy come over and he'd kick it, and yeah, it's all good, everything's good. Well, now you really can't do that, because it really could be a device, as we've seen stuff has happened, Boston and other locations. So you got to take it serious, and everybody's safety is utmost important. Clear the scene. See what you got. It may not be nothing, but better safe than sorry. There's a reason why they say that, I guess. So.
How did the 9/11 experiences affect your daily life?
Well, I mean, I changed positions. I went from Secret Service to the Air Marshals, so it affected me there. I think it affected a lot of the way we do business. If you think about the old days, you could go through security at the airport, really not that big of a deal. Now they do a fairly good job. I mean, I've never really waited, me personally, as a civilian, as retired life, 15 minutes max, but now we have security fees, we have security lines, and you can't bring certain amount of fluids onto the plane, and so it definitely changed everybody's life as far as some of those items. But for me, those are small price to pay. I mean, that's nothing big deal. So we can't bring a water bottle on there, or certainly knives or anything like that. I mean, I think most of the world's public would rather do that than have some knucklehead bring something on and have to deal with that 30,000 feet in the sky. And that's what makes it so different. It is in the sky, it's not where you can call for backup. And this is as an air marshal, if something's happening up there, you got to deal with it. You can't, it's not like you can, wait and call for your partners to show up on the scene and do stuff that it don't work that way. So it's kind of a tough job, actually, to be honest, if something was to happen. Luckily, a lot of things don't happen, so you still got to stay vigilant.
What do you want people to remember as we approach the 17th anniversary of these attacks?
It's a very good question, and I think a lot of people, I think they just naturally want to forget. I hope that's not the case. I mean, because this was, it was a horrible day in world history. So they just got to remember and keep their eyes open. It's kind of cliche, but see something, say something. Something doesn't look right. It may not be right. And what's the big deal to call, the authorities to say, look, something doesn't look right here. Well, that's what we pay taxes for. Let them come out there, check it out. And hopefully it's nothing, and everybody can go about their business. And yeah. It's changed a lot. Created different jobs. It's the way we approach schools now. It's just kind of crazy. But I hope no one forgets. I see a lot of people you see have the murals on their car or tattoos. I've seen guys with tattoos and stuff like that. So it's just something they'll have to pass down through history. And not being in school, I'm not quite sure what they talk about in school these days. So hopefully they let everybody know that of this, since the children, so they're aware of it, because clearly a lot of people weren't born in 9/11, so we have young people. But hopefully they can be taught. My name's Anthony Labosco, and on 9/11, I was United States Secret Service in Washington, D.C., in front of the White House.